The massive alien starship Dominion's fist hung in Earth's orbit like a dark metal moon. Its hull stretched for miles, bristling with weapons that could turn entire continents to glass. Captain Marcus Chun of the Human Royal Guard stood at attention in the ship's grand throne room, his black uniform pressed perfectly despite the 3-day journey from Earth. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. Their purple-skinned rulers commanded fleets that numbered in the millions, and their technology made human weapons look like stone clubs. Yet here Marcus stood, assigned as personal bodyguard to Princess Charlotte, the Emperor's youngest daughter. It was supposed to be an honor, the first human ever chosen for such position. Marcus knew better. It was a joke, a way for the Empire to show how little they thought of humanity. A pet human to guard their precious princess. Princess Charlotte sat on her floating chair, her lavender skin glowing softly in the dim light. She was young for a Zephyrian, only about 50 years old, which made her barely an adult by their standards. Her large silver eyes watched Marcus with curious interest as her father, Emperor Thane, spoke. "This human will serve as your new bodyguard," the Emperor announced, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "Consider it a gift from their pathetic little world." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. He had trained his whole life for the Royal Guard, fought in 3 wars, and earned more medals than he could count. But to these aliens, he was just another inferior being from a backwater planet. The Emperor turned to Marcus. "You will protect my daughter with your life, human. Though I doubt your primitive reflexes will be of much use if real danger presents itself." "Yes, your Imperial Majesty," Marcus replied, keeping his voice steady. Princess Charlotte floated down from her chair, moving with the grace that all Zephyrians possessed. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, but slender. Her movements reminded Marcus of a dancer. "What is your name, human?" she asked, her voice musical like all her species. "Captain Marcus Chun, your highness." "Marcus," she repeated, testing the sound. "I have never had a human guardian before. Tell me, are your people truly as weak as the reports claim?" The question stung, but Marcus had expected it. Humans were smaller than most galactic species, slower than many, and their technology lagged centuries behind. But they had something else, something the Empire had never understood. "We are what we need to be, your highness," Marcus answered carefully. The Emperor laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "How diplomatic. You humans always were good with words. It's about the only thing you excel at." Princess Charlotte studied Marcus with those silver eyes. There was intelligence there, and something else. Curiosity, maybe even kindness. It surprised him. "Father, I would like to show Marcus my quarters," she said. "As you wish. Remember, Charlotte, tomorrow we depart for the Outer Rim. The mining colonies have been experiencing some minor difficulties. Nothing that our fleet cannot handle, but I want you to observe how we deal with rebellions." Marcus's blood chilled. He had heard whispers about the Outer Rim colonies, slave worlds where humans and other conquered species mined radioactive materials until they died from exposure. The minor difficulties probably meant workers dying faster than they could be replaced. Princess Charlotte led Marcus through corridors that stretched for miles. The ship was like a floating city, home to millions of Zephyrians. Servants scurried about their duties, most of them from conquered species. Marcus saw humans among them, their faces hollow and defeated. "Tell me about Earth," Charlotte said as they walked. Marcus glanced at her, surprised by the request. "What would you like to know, your highness?" "Everything. I have read the official reports, but they seem incomplete." They were incomplete because they were lies. The Empire's reports described Earth as a primitive world of savage barbarians barely capable of space flight. They never mentioned human art, music, literature, or the incredible diversity of cultures that flourished on their blue world. "Earth is beautiful," Marcus began carefully. "We have vast oceans, mountains that touch the sky, and forests older than your empire. And your people?" Marcus thought of his sister Sarah, a teacher on Luna Colony, of his friend David, who composed symphonies that made people weep, of the children he had seen playing in the parks of New Geneva, their laughter echoing off the crystal domes. "We are survivors, your highness. We adapt. We endure." They reached her quarters, a vast suite of rooms filled with floating furniture and walls that showed real-time images of distant galaxies. It was larger than most human homes. "I have a confession," Charlotte said, dismissing her other servants with a wave. "I requested a human bodyguard specifically." Marcus's hand instinctively moved toward his weapon before stopping. Zephyrian technology made his plasma pistol useless anyway. "May I ask why, Your Highness?" She moved to a window that looked out at the stars. "Because I believe the reports about your people are wrong. I have been studying human culture, human history. Your species has survived ice ages, plagues, wars that should have destroyed you. You have created beauty that rivals anything in the galaxy." Marcus stared at her in shock. No Zephyrian had ever spoken of humanity with anything but contempt. "Why?" he asked. "Because someone needs to know the truth," she said simply. "My father sees only what he wants to see, a weak species to be exploited. But I see something different when I look at humans. I see potential." Before Marcus could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Red light bathed the corridors as automated voices announced, "Alert! Unidentified vessels approaching. All personnel to battle stations." Princess Charlotte's eyes widened with fear. Marcus's training kicked in immediately. He moved to the window and saw them, dozens of sleek black ships emerging from hyperspace. They bore no markings, but their design was unfamiliar. "Your Highness, we need to move to the secure levels immediately," Marcus said. But Charlotte was frozen, staring at the approaching fleet. "Those ships, I've seen them before. In classified files. They're shadow runners." Marcus had heard whispers of shadow runners in the darkest corners of the galaxy. Pirates, rebels, terrorists, no one knew for sure. They attacked Imperial ships and vanished without a trace. Some said they were ghosts. Others claimed they were survivors of worlds the Empire had destroyed. The ship shuddered as the first energy blast struck the hull. Through the window, Marcus could see the Imperial fleet scrambling to respond. But the shadow runners moved like nothing he had ever seen, darting between the massive battleships like insects around sleeping giants. "We have to go now," Marcus insisted. Charlotte nodded, but as they reached the door, it sealed shut with a metallic clang. Emergency protocols had activated, trapping them in her quarters. "The security system has locked down this section," Charlotte said, her voice trembling. "We're trapped." The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. Through the floor, Marcus could hear the sound of explosions and screaming. The shadow runners weren't just attacking the fleet. They had boarded the ship. Marcus examined the door's control panel. Zephyrian technology was far beyond human understanding, but he had learned a few things during his time in the Guard. The emergency lockdown was controlled by the ship's central computer. Breaking it would require either command codes, or he pulled out his plasma pistol and checked the charge. One shot, maybe two at full power. The weapon was primitive by galactic standards, but it used principles that still applied. "Stand back, Your Highness." "That won't work," Charlotte said. "The door is made of quantum-reinforced alloy. Your weapon cannot dash," Marcus fired. The plasma bolt struck the control panel in a shower of sparks. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door groaned and began to open. Charlotte stared in amazement. "How did you—" "Sometimes primitive solutions work when advanced ones don't," Marcus said. The overload confused the computer's security protocols. They stepped into the corridor and immediately heard the sounds of battle growing closer. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red. Bodies lay scattered on the floor, both Zephyrian crew and Shadowrunner attackers. Marcus had never seen Shadowrunners up close before. They wore armor that seemed to absorb light, making them hard to focus on. Their weapons were silent, firing beams that cut through Zephyrian shields like paper. "The escape pods are 3 levels down," Charlotte whispered. "No," Marcus said. "They'll be watching the escape routes. We need to find somewhere defensible and wait for rescue." "There won't be any rescue," Charlotte said quietly. "Father will save the ship and the crew, but if he thinks I'm already dead..." Marcus understood. To the Emperor, a daughter was replaceable. The Empire was not. They moved through the corridors carefully, avoiding the main passages where the sounds of battle echoed. Marcus led the way, his weapon ready. Behind him, Charlotte moved with surprising quiet for someone so tall. They reached a maintenance section when they heard voices approaching. Marcus pushed Charlotte behind a support beam and raised his weapon. 3 shadow runners emerged from the shadows, their armor making them almost invisible. They communicated in a language Marcus didn't recognize, but their intent was clear. They were searching for something. One of them stopped directly in front of their hiding place. Marcus held his breath, knowing that if they were discovered here, in this narrow space, he couldn't protect Charlotte. The shadow runner's helmet turned toward them. For a moment that lasted forever, Marcus stared into a visor that showed nothing. Then, the figure moved on, following his companions deeper into the ship. They're looking for something specific, Marcus whispered. Not just random destruction. Looking for what? Before Marcus could answer, the ship shuddered again, but this time it felt different. Not the impact of weapons, but the deep thrumming of engines shutting down. They're taking control of the ship, Charlotte said in horror. Marcus checked his weapon charge. Still one shot left, maybe two on low power. Against technology that made Zephyrian shields useless, it wouldn't matter much. But it was all he had. They made their way to what Charlotte said was a secondary command center. If they could reach the communication array, they might be able to send a distress signal to the Imperial fleet. The corridor ahead was filled with smoke and debris. Bodies of Zephyrian guards lay everywhere, their advanced weapons useless against attackers they couldn't see coming. Marcus examined one of the fallen guards' weapons. The energy rifle was far more powerful than his pistol, but when he tried to activate it, nothing happened. The weapon was biometrically locked to its owner. Only Zephyrians can use Zephyrian weapons, Charlotte explained. It prevents captured equipment from being turned against us. Smart, Marcus said. But it also means you can't arm your allies. They reached the secondary command center to find it already occupied. A dozen Shadowrunners worked at the control panels while others stood guard. Their leader stood before the main screen, watching the Imperial fleet retreat. Marcus pulled Charlotte back into the shadows. There was no way past that many enemies. His one pistol shot would barely scratch their armor. We need to find another way, he whispered. But as they turned to leave, Charlotte's foot hit a piece of debris. The sound echoed through the corridor like a gunshot. Every Shadowrunner in the command center turned toward them. Marcus pushed Charlotte behind him and raised his weapon, knowing it was futile. But sometimes, even futile gestures mattered. The Shadowrunners advanced slowly, their weapons trained on the two figures hiding in the doorway. Their leader spoke in that strange language, and Marcus thought he heard amusement in the alien voice. Then, something unexpected happened. One of the Shadowrunners removed his helmet. The face underneath was human. Marcus stared in shock. The man was older, scarred, with eyes that had seen too much death. But he was definitely human. Well, the man said in accented English. What have we here? A human in Imperial uniform, protecting one of the purple skins. Who are you? Marcus demanded, his weapon still raised. The man smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Name's Commander Reese. And you, soldier, are on the wrong side of this war. What war? The one your people have been fighting for 3 years now, Reese said. The one your Imperial friends forgot to mention. Earth fell 6 months ago. The colonies are fighting a losing battle against Empire reinforcements. And here you are, playing dress-up as a palace guard. The world seemed to tilt around Marcus. Earth fallen? The colonies at war? It wasn't possible. He would have known. The Royal Guard would have been recalled. You're lying, he said. Am I? Reese gestured to his companions. Several more removed their helmets, revealing human faces. We're the Human Liberation Front. What's left of your navy after the Empire's allies turned on them? Marcus's mind raced. The Empire had always controlled information flow, but this was impossible to hide. Show him, Reese ordered. One of his soldiers activated a holographic display. Images filled the air, burning cities, Imperial battleships bombarding human colonies, civilians being loaded into transport ships like cattle. The Empire decided humanity was too dangerous to remain free. Reese continued. Your people were getting too clever, asking too many questions. So they staged a rebellion and used it as an excuse to enslave your entire species. Marcus stared at the images, his weapon slowly lowering. He saw Luna Colony burning, the place where his sister taught children, the place he had called home. Sarah, he whispered. If you're thinking about family, soldier, they're either dead or in the labor camps, just like the rest of your people. Rage filled Marcus's chest, hot and pure. But alongside it came something else, understanding. The curious looks from Princess Charlotte. Her questions about human culture. Her father's dismissive comments about humans being good only with words. She had known. Maybe not everything, but she had known enough. Marcus turned to look at Charlotte, who had been listening in growing horror. Her silver eyes were wide with what looked like genuine shock. Did you know? He asked quietly. I knew there were military operations, she said. But Father said it was to help stabilize the human government. The reports never said. The reports lied, Reese said harshly. Just like everything else your empire tells you. Marcus faced a choice that would define the rest of his life. Behind him stood a princess of the empire that had enslaved his people. In front of him stood humans who had fought and died trying to free them. "Join us, soldier," Reese said. "Help us rescue the survivors and make the empire pay for what they've done." Marcus looked again at Charlotte. She was trembling now, her perfect composure shattered by the truth of what her people had done. "And her?" Marcus asked. "Hostage. Insurance. The emperor loves his ships more than his daughters, but she might be worth something in negotiations." "No." The word came out before Marcus fully realized he had spoken. Every eye in the room focused on him. "No," Reese repeated dangerously. Marcus raised his weapon again, but this time he pointed it at the Liberation Front soldiers. "She's under my protection. That doesn't change just because I learned the truth about her father. You're protecting one of them? After what they did to your people?" Marcus thought about Charlotte's questions, her curiosity about human culture, the kindness he had seen in her eyes. She wasn't responsible for her father's crimes. She was barely more than a child by Zephyrian standards. "She's not her father," Marcus said, "and I gave my word to protect her." Reese laughed bitterly. "Your word? To the empire that enslaved your species." "My word to myself," Marcus corrected. "I'm still human. That means something." The standoff stretched for long seconds. Marcus knew he couldn't win this fight. There were too many of them, and his weapon was almost drained. But sometimes principles mattered more than survival. Then Charlotte stepped forward, moving past Marcus to face the Liberation Front soldiers. "I surrender myself as your prisoner," she said clearly. "But I want to make a deal." Reese raised an eyebrow. "Princesses don't get to make deals." "This one does," Charlotte said with surprising strength. "I have access codes to the Imperial slave transport routes. Schedules, destinations, security protocols. Everything you need to free the human prisoners." Marcus stared at her in amazement. She was offering to betray her own father's empire to help the people she had just learned were enslaved. "Why?" Reese asked suspiciously. Charlotte looked back at Marcus, then at the holographic images still floating in the air. Images of human suffering caused by her father's orders. "Because someone needs to know the truth," she said, echoing her earlier words. "And now that I do, I can't pretend ignorance." Reese studied her for a long moment. "You understand that helping us makes you a traitor to your own species?" "My species made me a traitor the moment they chose genocide over justice," Charlotte replied. The ship shuddered again as explosions echoed from somewhere far below. The Imperial fleet was fighting back, but Marcus could tell from the sounds that the Liberation Front was winning. Reese made his decision. "Fine. But the human stays with you as insurance. If you try to betray us, he dies first." "Agreed," Charlotte said immediately. Marcus wanted to protest, but he understood the logic. Besides, his duty hadn't changed. Protect the princess. The fact that she was now helping his people only made that duty more important. "There's a secure data vault 3 levels up," Charlotte said. "I can access the transport schedules from there." "Lead the way, princess," Reese said. "And remember, one false move, and your human bodyguard becomes a very dead human bodyguard." As they moved through the ship's corridors, Marcus found himself walking beside Charlotte. The sounds of battle grew distant behind them. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why risk everything for people you barely know?" Charlotte was silent for a moment. Then she said, "My tutor once told me that true nobility comes not from the blood in your veins, but from the choices you make when no one is watching." I think she was right. Marcus nodded, understanding more than she knew. He had made his choice too, to protect someone who didn't deserve the sins of her father, to hold onto his humanity even when everything around him was falling apart. Behind them, the ship continued to shake as the Liberation Front completed their takeover. Ahead lay uncertain danger and the possibility of freeing thousands of enslaved humans. But for the first time since boarding the Dominion's Fist, Marcus felt like he was moving in the right direction. Data Vault was a crystalline chamber deep in the ship's core, protected by layers of security that would have stopped any normal intruder. But Princess Charlotte walked through the scanning fields like they were gentle breezes, her biometric signature opening each barrier. Commander Reese and his Liberation Front soldiers followed close behind, their weapons ready. Marcus stayed at Charlotte's side, still struggling to process everything he had learned. Earth enslaved, his sister Sarah likely dead or imprisoned. 3 years of war that the Empire had hidden from him. The vault itself was a sphere of pure energy, floating in the center of the chamber. Data streams flowed around it like liquid light, containing the Empire's deepest secrets. The slave transport schedules are in the deep files, Charlotte said, approaching the control interface. But accessing them will trigger security alerts. My father will know what I've done. Good, Reese said grimly. Let him know his precious daughter chose the right side. Charlotte hesitated, her hand hovering over the interface. Marcus could see the struggle in her silver eyes. She was about to betray everything she had been raised to believe in. Your Highness, Marcus said quietly, you don't have to do this. I can find another way to protect you. She looked at him with something that might have been gratitude. You would still protect me? Even knowing what my people did to yours. You're not responsible for your father's crimes. But I'm responsible for my own choices. Charlotte placed her palm on the scanner. And I choose to make this right. The interface came alive with swirling patterns of light. Data began flowing across multiple screens. Shipping routes, prisoner manifests, security codes. Marcus saw names scrolling past, thousands of them. Human names from every colony in their former space. My God, one of Reese's soldiers whispered. There are so many of them. Over 2 million humans in the labor camps, Charlotte said, her voice hollow. Another million in transit. The Empire has been moving your people to mining worlds in the Deep Rim, places where the radiation will kill them within 5 years. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. 2 million people, more than the entire population of some colonies. His sister could be among them, if she was still alive. Can you identify specific prisoners? He asked. Charlotte worked at the interface, her long fingers dancing across the controls. I can search by name, but the files are enormous. What are you looking for? Sarah Chun. She was a teacher on Luna Colony. Charlotte's search returned thousands of results. The Empire had been thorough in documenting their captives. But, finally, a single file appeared on screen. Marcus's heart nearly stopped. There was his sister's face, thinner than he remembered, her eyes hollow with despair. But alive. The file showed her current location, Mining Station Gamma 7 in the Kepler sector. She's alive, he whispered. For now, Reese said coldly. Gamma 7 is one of the worst stations. Uranium mining with minimal protection. Average life expectancy is 8 months. Marcus felt something break inside him. His sister, who had taught children to read, who wrote poetry in her spare time, was being slowly murdered in a radioactive hell because her species had dared to exist. How many can we save? He asked. Reese studied the data streams. With what we have, maybe a few thousand. But Charlotte's codes will let us hit multiple transports simultaneously. If we coordinate with other resistance cells. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the vault. Emergency lights bathed everything in angry red as a computerized voice announced. Security breach detected in Vault 7. Unauthorized access to classified files. All security teams respond immediately. They know, Charlotte said. Through the vault's transparent walls, Marcus could see Imperial security forces rushing toward their location. These weren't regular crew members. They were the Emperor's personal guard, elite warriors in powered armor who could each take on a dozen normal soldiers. How long until they break through? Reese demanded. Charlotte checked the vault's defenses. The barriers will hold for maybe 10 minutes. After that, we're all dead, Reese finished. How much data can you download in 10 minutes? Not enough. The files are too large, too complex. I need at least an hour to transfer everything. Marcus looked at the approaching security forces, then at the precious data flowing around them. Thousands of lives hung in the balance. His sister's life. The future of his entire species. He made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. Give me your weapon, he told Charlotte. What? Marcus, I can't dash. You said Zephyrian weapons only work for Zephyrians. Give me yours. Charlotte hesitated, then handed him her sidearm. It was elegant, crystalline, far more advanced than his primitive plasma pistol. When Marcus's fingers touched the grip, it hummed to life. Reese stared. That's impossible. Human biometrics can't activate Imperial weapons. I'm not just human anymore, Marcus realized. I've been exposed to Zephyrian technology for months. Their medical scanners, their atmosphere processors, their genetic scanners checking my DNA daily. They've been changing me without realizing it. Charlotte's eyes widened. The adaptation protocols. They're designed to help foreign species work with our technology. But they're supposed to take years to complete. Maybe humans adapt faster than you thought. Marcus tested the weapon. It felt natural in his hands, like an extension of his will. The power cell showed full charge, enough for dozens of shots at maximum power. "What are you planning?" Reese asked suspiciously. Marcus looked at the vault's defenses, calculating angles and timing. "I'm going to buy you time. You get that data and save as many people as you can." "That's suicide. There are 50 Imperial guards out there." "Then I guess I better make sure they don't get through." Before anyone could stop him, Marcus keyed the vault's manual override. The barriers dropped, and he stepped through the opening. The Imperial guards were halfway across the chamber, their powered armor gleaming in the emergency lighting. When they saw a single human emerge to face them, several actually laughed. "Stand down, human," their commander called out. "You are outnumbered and outgunned." Marcus raised Charlotte's weapon. "Yeah, I get that a lot." The first shot took the commander completely by surprise. The crystalline beam punched through his armor like paper, dropping him instantly. The other guards scattered, seeking cover behind data storage units. But Marcus wasn't fighting like a human anymore. The weapon's targeting system had interfaced directly with his nervous system, letting him track multiple enemies simultaneously. He moved with impossible grace, each shot finding its mark despite the guard's superior technology. Behind him, he could hear Reese shouting orders while Charlotte worked frantically at the interface. Data flowed faster now, terabytes of information containing the locations and schedules of every human prisoner in the Empire. An energy blast seared the air next to Marcus's head. The guards had recovered from their initial surprise and were fighting back with coordinated precision. But they were used to facing enemies who relied on the same technology they did. They had never fought someone who combined human unpredictability with Zephyrian weapons. Marcus dove behind a pillar as return fire lit up the chamber. Energy beams scarred the crystalline walls, sending fragments of light cascading to the floor. He counted muzzle flashes, calculating positions, and firing patterns. 12 guards left. The weapon's charge was holding steady. Zephyrian power cells were incredibly efficient. "Marcus!" Charlotte's voice echoed across the chamber. "I have the transport schedules, but I need more time for the security codes." More time. That meant more guards would be coming. Marcus could already hear reinforcements in the corridors outside. He broke cover, rolling across the open floor while firing at 3 different targets. 2 guards went down, but the third shot caught Marcus in the shoulder, spinning him around. The armor-piercing round went clean through, but the wound wasn't fatal. Human endurance. That was something the Empire had never properly measured. They saw humans as physically weak, but they didn't understand the difference between weakness and efficiency. A human could keep fighting with wounds that would disable other species. Marcus kept moving, kept shooting. The remaining guards were good, better than good. But they were fighting a war they had never trained for. Their armor protected them from energy weapons and projectiles. It wasn't designed to stop someone who fought like a human, but shot like a Zephyrian. 8 minutes, Charlotte called out. 8 minutes to hold this position against an entire security battalion. Marcus's shoulder was bleeding freely now, and his left arm wasn't working properly. But the weapon never wavered in his right hand. A new group of guards rushed into the chamber, 20 more elite warriors in full combat armor. They spread out professionally, using overlapping fields of fire to pin Marcus down. This was it. No more room to maneuver, no more tactical advantages. Just him and a crystalline weapon against the best soldiers the Empire could produce. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, thinking of his sister in that radioactive hell. Thinking of 2 million humans depending on the data Charlotte was downloading. Thinking of a princess who had chosen to betray her own father rather than live with the truth of genocide. When he opened his eyes, something had changed. The weapon in his hands felt different, not just a tool, but part of him. The targeting system wasn't just connected to his nervous system anymore. It was synchronizing with his thoughts, his instincts, his very will to survive. He stood up in full view of 20 Imperial guards and began to fight like humanity itself depended on it. The first volley should have killed him. Energy beams converged on his position from every angle, enough firepower to slag a battle tank. But Marcus wasn't there anymore. He moved like liquid lightning, the weapon tracking targets faster than conscious thought. 1, 2, 3 guards down before they could adjust their aim. The targeting system showed him trajectories that shouldn't have been possible. Ricochet shots that curved around cover. Reflected beams that struck enemies from impossible angles. The weapon wasn't just firing energy anymore. It was reshaping it according to his will. 4, 5, 6. The guard's coordinated fire began to falter as their numbers dropped. These were elite warriors, but they had never faced an enemy who seemed to predict their movements before they made them. Impossible. Marcus heard one of them whisper over the comm channel. No human can fight like this. 7, 8, 9. Maybe no human could, but Marcus wasn't fighting as just a human anymore. He was fighting as something new, a synthesis of human determination and Zephyrian technology, a living weapon forged in the fires of necessity. 10, 11. The remaining guards began to retreat, their tactical discipline crumbling. They had trained for every kind of combat scenario except this. A single opponent who moved like physics, didn't apply, and shot with the accuracy of a computer-guided system. 12, 13, 14, 6 minutes. Charlotte's voice cut through the sound of weapons fire. 6 minutes. Marcus could hold for 6 minutes. He had to hold for 6 minutes. More guards poured into the chamber, but these weren't the elite units. They were regular security, armed with standard weapons and basic armor. Against the crystalline weapon that had fully bonded with his nervous system, they might as well have been carrying clubs. Marcus moved through them like a force of nature. Every shot found its mark. Every movement flowed into the next with impossible grace. He was still bleeding, still human, but he was also something more. Behind him, data continued to flow from the Imperial Vault. Thousands of lives, depending on information that could free them from slavery. Depending on a human who refused to surrender, even when surrender made sense. The weapon's charge finally began to drop. Even Zephyrian technology had limits. But Charlotte's voice rang out across the chamber. I have it. All of it. Transport schedules, security codes, guard rotations, everything. Relief flooded through Marcus, followed immediately by the realization that he could barely stand. The adrenaline that had carried him through the fight was fading, leaving behind exhaustion and pain. Reese and his soldiers emerged from the vault, their own weapons covering the chamber's entrances. "Time to go, soldier," Reese called out. But as they moved toward the exit, new alarms began sounding. These weren't security alerts. They were something far worse. Fleet Admiral in the sector, the computerized voice announced. Imperial reinforcements arriving in 60 seconds. Charlotte's face went pale. My uncle, Admiral Corax. He commands the 3rd Fleet, 500 ships. Can your people fight that many? Marcus asked Reese. The Liberation Front commander looked grim. Not even close. We came here to steal data, not fight the entire Imperial Navy. Through the chamber's viewports, Marcus could see the first ships emerging from hyperspace. Massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed even the Dominion's fist. If Admiral Corax decided to retake the ship by force, everyone aboard would die in the crossfire. There has to be another way, Charlotte said desperately. Some way to get the data to your people without dash. She stopped mid-sentence, her silver eyes widening with sudden understanding. The emergency broadcast system, she whispered. Every ship in the Imperial fleet is required to monitor emergency frequencies. If I transmit the data as an Imperial priority message, it would reach every resistance cell in the galaxy simultaneously, Reese finished. But the transmission would be traced back to this ship within minutes. Then, we better make those minutes count. Charlotte ran back to the interface, her fingers flying over the controls. I can piggyback the data on an Imperial distress signal. It will look like routine traffic until someone actually analyzes the content. Marcus watched the fleet positions on the tactical display. Admiral Corax's ships were taking formation around the Dominion's fist, trapping it in a web of firepower. There would be no escape once they completed their deployment. How long for the transmission? Marcus asked. 3 minutes for full upload to all Imperial frequencies. We don't have 3 minutes. Through the ship's communication system, a new voice echoed cold, authoritative, absolutely certain of its power. This is Admiral Corax of the 3rd Fleet. Unknown vessels. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed. You have 60 seconds to comply. Reese checked his weapon. 60 seconds to live free or die fighting. I've had worse odds. But Charlotte was still working at the interface, her concentration absolute. Data streams flowed around her like rivers of light as she prepared to broadcast the location of every human slave in the Empire. 30 seconds, came the Admiral's voice. Marcus made one final decision. He moved to the chamber's main communication panel and opened a direct channel to the Imperial fleet. Admiral Corax, This is Captain Marcus Chun of the Royal Guard. I am aboard this vessel with Princess Charlotte. Any attack will result in her death. Silence on the channel. Then, Captain Chun, you are listed as missing in action. I'm protecting the princess from hostile forces that have taken control of this ship. Then, why haven't you evacuated her to a secure location? Marcus looked at Charlotte, still working frantically to complete the data transmission. She met his eyes and nodded slightly. Because, Admiral, Marcus said quietly, sometimes protecting someone means helping them do what's right, even when it's dangerous. The transmission bar on Charlotte's interface showed 90% complete. Captain Chun, you will escort Princess Charlotte to the nearest airlock immediately. A shuttle will retrieve you both. 95%. I'm afraid I can't do that, sir. 98%. Captain, you are in violation of direct orders from a fleet admiral. Stand down immediately. 99%. Marcus looked at Charlotte one last time. She was a princess of the Empire, but she was also the person who had chosen to betray her own father to save enslaved humans she had never met. Admiral, Marcus said, sometimes humans surprise people. 100%. The data upload completed just as the first energy beams lit up space around the Dominion's fist. But Charlotte's transmission was already racing through hyperspace, carrying the locations and schedules of every human prisoner to resistance cells across the galaxy. It was done. Whatever happened next, the information was out there. Marcus turned to find Charlotte standing beside him, her face calm despite the explosions beginning to rock the ship. Thank you, she said simply. For what? For showing me what courage really looks like. Outside, Admiral Corax's fleet began their assault on the ship that held his niece. But Marcus knew that whatever else happened, they had already won. The data was spreading across the galaxy like wildfire, carrying hope to places where hope had died 3 years ago. The battle for the Dominion's fist was just beginning. The ship shuddered as Admiral Corax's fleet unleashed their opening barrage. Through the viewports, Marcus could see streams of energy lighting up space like deadly fireworks. But the Admiral was being careful, precision strikes designed to disable rather than destroy. He wouldn't risk killing his niece, even if it meant giving the Liberation Front time to escape. We need to reach the hangar bays, Commander Reese said, checking his tactical display. My people are fighting their way to the escaped ships, but they won't wait long. Charlotte shook her head. The hangar bays are on the other side of the ship. We'll never make it through the security cordons. Marcus studied the ship's layout on a nearby terminal. The Dominion's fist was massive, over 20 miles long, and filled with maze-like corridors designed to confuse invaders. But he had spent weeks learning its layout as part of his security duties. There's another way, he said. The maintenance tunnels that run through the ship's core. They're not on the standard maps, but they connect to every major section. Those tunnels are barely wide enough for humans, Charlotte pointed out, and they're filled with radiation from the ship's power core. Then it's a good thing we're small and expendable, Reese said grimly. They made their way through corridors that echoed with the sounds of battle. Imperial security forces were fighting Liberation Front soldiers throughout the ship, but both sides were pulling their punches. No one wanted to damage something as valuable as the Emperor's personal flagship. The entrance to the maintenance system was hidden behind a service panel in the ship's lower levels. Marcus had discovered it during one of his patrols, a narrow tunnel that maintenance robots used to service the ship's massive engines. I'll go first, Marcus said, prying open the panel. Charlotte, you stay in the middle. Reese, watch our backs. The tunnel was cramped and dark, lit only by the faint glow of power conduits running along the walls. The radiation wasn't immediately lethal, but Marcus could feel it as a warm tingle against his skin. Too much exposure would be deadly. They crawled through the narrow space for what felt like hours. Behind them, the sounds of battle grew distant, replaced by the deep thrumming of the ship's engines. Charlotte moved with surprising grace despite her height, folding herself into the cramped space. I've been thinking, she said quietly as they navigated a particularly tight junction, about what my uncle will do when he realizes what we've transmitted. What do you mean? Marcus asked. Admiral Corax isn't just a fleet commander. He's the head of Imperial intelligence. When he discovers that slave transport schedules have been broadcast to every resistance cell in the galaxy. She shuddered. He'll accelerate the final protocol. Stop crawling. What's the final protocol? Charlotte's voice was barely above a whisper. Complete extermination of all human prisoners. Rather than risk rescue operations, they'll simply eliminate the evidence. Marcus felt ice in his veins. How many people? All of them. 2 million humans dead within days. The tunnel suddenly felt even more cramped. They had succeeded in getting the information out, but success might have doomed everyone they were trying to save. Unless, Charlotte continued thoughtfully. Unless what? Unless we can get to the Admiral's command ship. The final protocol requires direct authorization from a fleet admiral. If we could stop the transmission. That's insane, Reese said. His flagship is surrounded by 200 escort vessels. Even if we could somehow get aboard, Korax would never listen to a human. He might listen to me. Marcus turned to look at Charlotte in the dim light. You're talking about surrendering to him. I'm talking about saving 2 million lives. They reached a junction where the tunnel branched in 3 directions. According to Marcus's mental map, the hangar bays lay to the left, while the right path led to the ship's communication array. If we go to the hangar, Reese said, we can escape with the data and hope other resistance cells can mount rescue operations before the final protocol activates. How long would that take? Marcus asked. Weeks, maybe months to coordinate that many simultaneous strikes. And how long before Korax starts executing prisoners? Hours, Charlotte said quietly. Marcus stared down the tunnel toward the communication array. If they could reach it, they might be able to contact Admiral Korax directly. But that meant staying aboard a ship that was under active assault, risking capture or death. There's a third option, Marcus said slowly. We split up. Reese, you take your people and get that data to the Resistance. Charlotte, and I will try to reach Admiral Korax. You're asking me to abandon you. I'm asking you to complete the mission. That data is useless if there's no one left to rescue. Reese studied Marcus for a long moment. You know, this is probably suicide. Yeah, I'm getting used to those odds. They reached the junction where their paths would diverge. Reese clasped Marcus's hand in farewell. For what it's worth, soldier, you're nothing like what the Empire says about humans. None of us are, Marcus replied. That's why we're going to win. Reese disappeared into the left tunnel, heading for the hangar bays and escape. Marcus and Charlotte took the right path, crawling deeper into the ship's core toward the communication array. The radiation levels were higher here, close to the main power source. Marcus's skin felt like it was sunburning from the inside, and he could taste metal in his mouth. Charlotte seemed less affected. Zephyrian physiology was more resistant to radiation than human. Why are you doing this? Charlotte asked as they navigated around a massive power coupling. Your people are enslaved, your planet conquered. You could escape with Reese and live free. Marcus considered the question. A few days ago, the answer would have been simple: duty, honor, his oath to protect her. But now, because you were right, he said finally, someone needs to know the truth. And the truth is that this war isn't about humans versus Zephyrians. It's about people who choose compassion against those who choose cruelty. They reached the communication array to find it already occupied. Imperial technicians worked frantically to repair damage from the Liberation Front assault. Sparks flew from damaged consoles while officers shouted orders in the chaos. There, Charlotte pointed to a secondary console. I can access the command frequencies from there, but I need time to establish a secure link. How much time? 5 minutes for basic contact. 10 to convince him not to execute the prisoners. Marcus counted the technicians and guards. 12 people between them and the console. His weapon was recharged from spare power cells they had found in the tunnel, but Charlotte was unarmed now. Can you fight? He asked her. She looked confused. Fight? I'm not a warrior, Marcus. I'm barely an adult by my people's standards. Your people enslave mine. Maybe it's time to decide what kind of person you want to be. Charlotte stared at him, then at the busy technicians. Slowly, she nodded. What do you need me to do? Marcus smiled grimly. Cause a distraction. Something that will draw their attention away from the communications console. What kind of distraction? I don't know. You're the princess. Improvise. Charlotte took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked into the chamber like she owned it. Attention, she called out in her most imperial voice. I am Princess Charlotte Vex Zephyr, daughter of Emperor Thane. By my authority, I am commandeering this facility. Every head in the room turned toward her. The technicians dropped their tools and knelt in the traditional gesture of respect. Even the guards lowered their weapons, uncertain how to react to royalty giving orders during a battle. Marcus used their confusion to slip around the chamber's perimeter. The secondary console was unguarded now. Everyone focused on the unexpected appearance of the princess. Your Highness, the senior technician stammered. We were not informed of your presence. How may we serve? I require immediate access to Admiral Corax's command ship, Charlotte said imperiously. There are matters of galactic security that demand his attention. Of course, Your Highness, but the communication systems are damaged. It may take some time to establish a clear connection. Then, work faster. Marcus reached the console and began working on the communication protocols. Zephyrian technology was complex, but his exposure to their systems was paying off. He could feel the interface responding to his thoughts, establishing connections across the void to Admiral Corax's flagship. Your Highness, one of the guards said uncertainly, we received reports that you were being held hostage by human terrorists. Charlotte's voice didn't waver. Reports can be misleading. I am here of my own free will, working to resolve this crisis peacefully. But the humans aboard this ship are under my protection, Charlotte finished firmly. Any hostile action against them will be considered an act of treason against the imperial family. Marcus had established the connection. Admiral Corax's face appeared on the screen, his expression shifting from anger to confusion when he saw his niece. Charlotte, what are you doing on that channel? Uncle, I need you to listen carefully. The situation aboard this ship is not what you think. I know exactly what the situation is. Human terrorists have taken control of an imperial vessel and used you as a shield. The matter will be resolved shortly. No, Charlotte said firmly. It won't, because I'm ordering you to stand down. Admiral Corax's expression darkened. You're ordering me? Child, you have no authority to give orders to a fleet admiral. I have the authority of someone who knows the truth about the human slave camps. Silence stretched across the connection. Marcus could see the admiral's jaw tighten as he realized the implications. What do you think you know? Corax asked quietly. I know about the labor camps, the radiation mining, the 2 million humans being worked to death in the Deep Rim, and I know about the final protocol. The admiral's face went pale. How could you possibly dash? Because I helped broadcast that information to every resistance cell in the galaxy, Charlotte said calmly. The locations, the schedules, the security codes, all of it. For a moment, Marcus thought Admiral Corax might have stroke. The implications of what Charlotte had done were staggering. Not just treason against the Empire, but the complete exposure of their most classified operations. You have committed an act of war against your own people, the Admiral said slowly. Do you understand what that means? It means I chose to be on the right side of history. It means you have doomed every human prisoner in our custody. I will activate the final protocol within the hour. No, you won't. Corax laughed bitterly. And what's to stop me? Charlotte looked directly into the camera. Because if you do, I'll broadcast the complete Imperial genetic database to every species you've ever conquered. Biological weaknesses, reproductive cycles, genetic engineering records, everything needed to develop weapons specifically designed to kill Zephyrians. Marcus stared at her in amazement. She was threatening to give the Empire's enemies the tools for genocide. The ultimate insurance policy. Admiral Corax's face had gone from pale to gray. You would destroy your own species? I would save 2 million innocent people from execution. The choice is yours, Uncle. The connection fell silent except for the distant sounds of battle still echoing through the ship. Marcus could see Admiral Corax thinking, calculating odds and consequences. Even if I agreed, the Admiral said finally, the Resistance doesn't have the ships to mount rescue operations at 200 mining stations simultaneously. They'll save a few thousand at most. Then we'll give them ships. What? Charlotte turned to Marcus. The Imperial shipyards at Kepler Station. They're building the new slave transports, ships designed to carry thousands of prisoners at once. Marcus understood immediately. If the Resistance could capture those ships, they'd have the capacity to mount large-scale rescue operations. The shipyards are heavily defended, Admiral Corax pointed out. But not against an attack from inside, Charlotte said. Someone with Imperial clearance codes could disable the defenses long enough for the Resistance to strike. You're talking about another act of treason. I'm talking about saving lives. Your choice, Uncle. Help us free the prisoners, or explain to the Emperor why his daughter chose to commit genocide rather than let innocent people be murdered. Marcus could see the Admiral wrestling with impossible choices. Save the prisoners and face charges of treason, or execute them and risk his niece destroying their entire species. There's a third option, Admiral Corax said quietly. I could simply destroy this ship with all hands aboard. No more princess. No more genetic database. No more problems. Charlotte smiled sadly. You could try, but I've already transmitted the genetic data to multiple locations. My death would only ensure its release. You're bluffing. Am I? You've known me since I was a child, Uncle. Have I ever bluffed about anything important? Another long silence. Marcus found himself holding his breath as the fate of 2 million people hung on the decision of one fleet admiral. The Kepler shipyards, Admiral Corax said finally, if I were to hypothetically disable their defenses, how would the resistance know to attack? Charlotte smiled. Leave that to us. Marcus felt a surge of hope. It wasn't over yet, but they had a chance. A real chance to save the prisoners instead of just getting them all killed. There's one condition, the Admiral continued. You surrender yourself to my custody immediately. If you're going to betray the Empire, you'll face the consequences. Agreed. What? Marcus turned to stare at her. Charlotte, if you surrender, they'll execute you for treason. Probably, she said calmly. But 2 million people will live. Marcus realized she had planned this from the beginning. The moment she chose to help transmit the prisoner data, she had known it would mean her death. She was sacrificing herself to save humans she had never met. Your Highness, he said quietly, I can't let you do this. You can't stop me. This is my choice. Then, I'm coming with you. Now it was Charlotte's turn to stare. Marcus, you could escape. Reese's people would take you to freedom. My oath was to protect you. That doesn't change just because you're doing something noble and stupid. She looked at him with those silver eyes, and Marcus saw gratitude mixed with sadness. You realize they'll execute you too. Yeah, I'm getting really tired of being threatened with death today. Admiral Corax's voice cut through their conversation. Touching as this is, I need an answer. Do we have an agreement? Charlotte straightened, every inch the Imperial Princess. We have an agreement. I'll surrender to your custody in exchange for your assistance in freeing the human prisoners. Very well. Prepare for transport to my flagship. And Charlotte, I'm sorry it came to this. The connection ended, leaving them alone in the communication chamber. Around them, the Imperial technicians continued their work, pretending they hadn't heard every word of a conversation that would reshape the galaxy. Marcus checked his weapon one last time. Whatever came next, he would face it standing beside someone who had chosen compassion over loyalty to her own species. No regrets? He asked Charlotte. She smiled, and for the first time since he had met her, she looked truly at peace. No regrets. Someone needed to know the truth. And now they do. Outside, Admiral Corax's fleet waited to receive them. But across the galaxy, resistance cells were already moving, preparing to launch the largest rescue operation in galactic history. The real battle was just beginning. The transport to Admiral Corax's flagship was silent, except for the hum of engines. Marcus sat across from Charlotte in the cramped shuttle, both of them flanked by Imperial guards in full combat armor. Through the viewport, he could see the massive dreadnought Imperial Wrath growing larger, its weapon arrays capable of sterilizing planets. I've been thinking about something, Charlotte said quietly, her voice barely audible over the engine noise. Marcus looked at her questioningly. The guards had allowed them to speak, probably figuring that 2 prisoners on their way to execution deserved some final words. About what you said, that this war isn't humans versus Zephyrians, but compassion versus cruelty. She paused, studying her hands. I think you're wrong. Marcus raised an eyebrow. How so? I think it's simpler than that. It's about people who choose to see others as people, versus those who see them as things to be used. Before Marcus could respond, the shuttle docked with the flagship. The guards escorted them through corridors that could have housed small cities. Everything about the ship spoke of imperial power. Soaring ceilings decorated with the conquests of 1,000 worlds, walls lined with trophies from defeated species. Admiral Corax waited for them in his private office, a room that overlooked the ship's main hangar. He was older than Marcus had expected, his purple skin marked with the ritual scars of a lifetime warrior. But his silver eyes were sharp with intelligence. Niece, he said formally as they entered. Uncle. Charlotte's response was equally formal. Corax dismissed the guards with a gesture. When they were alone, his rigid posture relaxed slightly. Do you understand what you've done? He asked. Not just the treason, Charlotte. Do you understand the consequences? I understand that 2 million innocent people will live instead of die. And what about the Empire? What happens when every conquered species learns that our genetic weaknesses are available to the highest bidder? Charlotte met his gaze steadily. Perhaps the Empire will learn to rely on diplomacy instead of fear. Korax laughed bitterly. Diplomacy? From a species that couldn't even unify its own planet until we showed them how. Marcus felt anger flare at the casual dismissal. We unified ourselves plenty of times. You just never bothered to learn our history. Human history is 3,000 years of constant warfare, punctuated by brief periods of exhausted peace. Zephyrian history is 10,000 years of conquest and slavery. Marcus shot back. At least when humans fought, it was among equals. Equals. Korax's voice rose. Your people had barely achieved faster-than-light travel when we found you. You were fighting over resources on a single world while we controlled 1,000 systems. And yet you were so afraid of us that you decided to enslave our entire species rather than risk letting us develop freely. The Admiral was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said finally. We were afraid. Do you know why? Marcus shook his head. Because in 300 years, your people went from primitive flying machines to interstellar ships. In 50 years, you went from splitting the atom to fusion reactors that rivaled our own. Your species doesn't just adapt. It evolves at impossible speed. Korax moved to the viewport, looking out at Earth's blue marble hanging in space below. Our projections showed that within 500 years, human technology would surpass our own. Within 1,000 years, you would be the dominant species in this galaxy. The Senate decided that was unacceptable. So you chose genocide. We chose survival. Or thought we did. He turned back to face them. But I've been thinking about what you said, Charlotte. About choosing compassion over cruelty. And I wonder if we chose our own extinction instead. Charlotte looked puzzled. What do you mean? I mean that conquering species eventually run out of things to conquer. When that happens, they either evolve or collapse. We chose stagnation. For 10,000 years, we've been the same technology, the same society, the same rigid hierarchy. We haven't grown because we haven't needed to. Marcus began to understand. But humans forced you to grow. Exactly. For the first time in millennia, we faced a species that could challenge us. Not militarily. Your weapons were pathetic. But intellectually, creatively. You solved problems in ways we never considered. You adapted to situations that would have stopped us cold. Korax activated a holographic display showing battle reports from across the galaxy. Do you know what your resistance has done in 3 years? They've developed new fighting techniques that our tactical computers can't predict. They've created weapons from scavenged Imperial technology that work better than our originals. They've built ships that are faster and more maneuverable than anything in our fleet. The display showed footage of human fighters darting between Imperial battleships like insects around sleeping giants. Their movements were erratic, unpredictable, completely at odds with standard military doctrine. Your people don't fight like any species we've encountered, Korax continued. They don't follow the established rules of warfare. They improvise. They take risks that no rational commander would approve. They turn disasters into victories through sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Marcus thought about Commander Reese and his Liberation Front soldiers. They had captured an Imperial flagship with a handful of ships that any sane tactical analysis would have declared inadequate for the mission. We created our own worst nightmare, Korax said quietly. By trying to destroy humanity, we force you to become exactly what we feared, a species that grows stronger under pressure. An alert chimed on Korax's desk. He activated the communication panel, and his aide's voice filled the room. Admiral, we're receiving reports from the Kepler sector. The Resistance has launched coordinated attacks on 7 mining facilities. They're using ships we don't recognize. Marcus and Charlotte exchanged glances. The rescue operations had begun. Admiral, the aide continued, there's something else. The attacking ships, they're not just rescuing prisoners. They're recruiting them. Every freed human is joining the Resistance fleets. Korax closed his eyes. Of course they are. We turned their entire species into an army and then gave them nothing to lose. More reports came in over the next hour. Mining station after mining station falling to Resistance attacks. But these weren't the desperate raids Marcus had expected. They were coordinated military operations with precision timing and overwhelming force. How are they managing this? Charlotte asked, studying the tactical displays. The Resistance never had this many ships. Marcus smiled grimly. They do now. Every Imperial transport they capture becomes a Resistance vessel. Every Imperial weapon becomes part of their arsenal. And Every freed human becomes another soldier with nothing left to lose. The door to Korax's office slid open, and an Imperial officer rushed in without ceremony. Admiral, urgent message from Fleet Command. The Emperor is demanding immediate activation of the final protocol. All human prisoners are to be eliminated within 6 hours. Marcus felt his heart sink. Despite everything they had done, Emperor Thane was still willing to commit genocide rather than admit defeat. Tell the Emperor, Korax said slowly, that the final protocol is no longer operationally viable. Sir, tell him that Princess Charlotte has ensured our genetic database will be released to every hostile species in the galaxy if a single human prisoner dies. The officer looked confused. Sir, with respect, that would be impossible to verify. The Emperor could call her bluff. Charlotte spoke up from her chair. It's not a bluff. She activated her personal communicator, a device that Marcus hadn't realized she still carried. The small screen showed a countdown timer with less than 5 hours remaining. Dead man's switch, she explained. If I don't input a code every 12 hours, the genetic database transmits automatically to every major news network, military command, and resistance cell in known space. The officer went pale. Your Highness, that's treason. Yes, we've established that. Charlotte looked at her uncle. The question is whether the Empire will choose to evolve or die. Admiral Korax stared at his niece for a long moment. Then he turned to his aide. Signal the fleet. All units are to stand down and withdraw to defensive positions. No action is to be taken against resistance forces unless directly attacked. Sir, the Emperor's orders are superseded by operational reality. If the Emperor wants to commit genocide, he can find another admiral to do it. The aide left, clearly disturbed by the implications of what he had witnessed. Marcus realized they had just witnessed something unprecedented, an Imperial admiral choosing to disobey a direct order from the Emperor. You know this means civil war, Charlotte said quietly. Korax nodded. It was probably inevitable anyway. The Empire has been fracturing for decades. This just accelerates the process. What about us? Marcus asked. We're still your prisoners. The Admiral considered this. Technically, yes. But prisoners of what? If I'm about to be branded a traitor anyway, I suppose I can choose who to be treasonous with. He moved to his desk and activated the security protocols. Charlotte, your dead man's switch. How long can you maintain it? As long as necessary. But Marcus needs medical attention for his radiation exposure, and I need to coordinate with the Resistance to make sure the rescue operations continue. And I need to prepare for the Imperial fleet that my brother will undoubtedly send to arrest me. Korax looked out at the stars. Strange how quickly a life's work can become meaningless. Marcus understood what the Admiral meant. Everything Korax had built, every victory he had won for the Empire, was about to be branded as the accomplishments of a traitor. Maybe it's not meaningless, Marcus said. Maybe it just needs a new purpose. Korax raised an eyebrow. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that the Empire is going to tear itself apart over this. The progressive elements who support Charlotte against the hardliners who want genocide. That civil war is going to create chaos across 1,000 worlds. And chaos creates opportunities for people to choose who they want to be instead of who they were told to be. Charlotte smiled suddenly. Marcus is right. This isn't about humans versus Zephyrians anymore. It's about everyone who believes in coexistence against those who believe in domination. Korax activated his tactical display, showing the positions of Imperial fleets throughout the galaxy. Half of these commanders will support Charlotte's position, he mused. The other half will follow the Emperor's orders regardless of consequences. Then, we need to reach the ones who might listen, Charlotte said. Show them that there's another way. Marcus thought about something he had learned during his time with the Resistance. The Empire controls through fear. But fear only works when people believe they have no choice. What happens when they realize they do have choices? Revolution, Korax said simply, which might be exactly what this galaxy needs. An alert sounded on the communication panel. Korax activated it to find Commander Reese's face on the screen, speaking from what looked like the bridge of a captured Imperial transport. Admiral Korax, Reese said formally, I understand you've decided to join the winning side. I've decided to join the right side, Korax corrected, though I'm not certain it's the winning side yet. It will be. We've rescued over 100,000 prisoners in the last 6 hours. Every one of them is ready to fight. Every captured ship increases our fleet strength. And Every world that hears about Princess Charlotte's stand is questioning their loyalty to the Empire. Marcus could hear the difference in Rhys's voice. This wasn't the desperate rebel leader he had met on the Dominion's Fist. This was a military commander who could see victory on the horizon. "What do you need from us?" Charlotte asked. "Safe passage for the rescue fleets. Admiral Corax's codes would let us move through Imperial space without being intercepted." Corax nodded. "You'll have them. But I want something in return. Which is proof that humans can build something better than they destroy. Win this war, free your people, but don't become the Empire you're fighting against." Rhys was quiet for a moment. "That's a harder promise than you might think, Admiral. When people have been enslaved and murdered, vengeance becomes very appealing." "I know, but if humanity just replaces one tyranny with another, then all of this suffering will have been for nothing." Charlotte leaned forward. "Commander Rhys, I want to address the human resistance directly. Can you arrange a general broadcast?" "Easily. We control enough of the Imperial communication network now. But what will you tell them?" Charlotte looked at Marcus, then at her uncle. "The truth. All of it. About the Empire's crimes, about the choice we all face, and about the kind of galaxy we could build if we choose cooperation over conquest." Marcus realized she was right. This war wasn't going to be won with weapons or tactics. It was going to be won by convincing people, human and Zephyrian and every other species caught in between, that there was something worth building instead of just something worth destroying. "Set up," Corax told Rhys. "But make it a general broadcast to all Imperial frequencies. If Charlotte is going to commit treason, she might as well do it properly." As Rhys's image faded, Marcus looked out at the stars and wondered what his sister would think of all this. Sarah, who taught children to read, who believed in the power of education to change the world. She was probably in some resistance camp now, helping to plan rescue operations for other prisoners. If she could see him now, standing with a Zephyrian princess and an Imperial admiral who had chosen conscience over duty, would she understand? Marcus thought she would, because at its heart, this was about the same thing Sarah taught in her classroom, that every person had the potential to choose who they wanted to be, even if the choice came with a price none of them could fully calculate yet. The galaxy-wide broadcast began at 0800 Standard Imperial Time. Princess Charlotte stood before the cameras in Admiral Corax's war room, her silver eyes steady as she looked into a lens that would carry her words to billions of beings across the Empire. Marcus stood just out of frame, his hand resting on his weapon. Not to threaten anyone, but because old habits died hard. Even now, his instinct was to protect her. "Citizens of the Empire," Charlotte began, her voice clear and strong. "My name is Princess Charlotte Vex Zephyr, daughter of Emperor Thane. I speak to you today about truth, about choice, and about the kind of galaxy we will leave for our children." The communication boards lit up immediately as the transmission reached every corner of Imperial space. Admiral Corax monitored the responses, his expression growing increasingly surprised. "For 10,000 years," Charlotte continued, "our empire has grown through conquest. We told ourselves it was necessary, that we brought order to chaos, civilization to barbarism. We believed that our strength gave us the right to rule over others." Marcus could see the fleet positions updating on the tactical displays. Some Imperial commanders were moving to intercept the broadcast source. Others were holding position, waiting to hear what their princess had to say. 3 years ago, that philosophy led us to a terrible decision. When humanity developed too quickly, when their potential became too great to ignore, our leaders chose to enslave them rather than welcome them as equals. The responses were immediate and intense. Outraged communications from hardline Imperial commanders, but also messages of support from worlds that had long chafed under Imperial